Hello and welcome everyone to the City of Gainesville Hot Funds Workshop. My name is Jamie Marsh and I'm the Tourism Marketing Coordinator for the City of Gainesville. I'll be walking you through this presentation today. The purpose of this workshop is to dive deep into what Hot Funds is and all the requirements that come along with applying. We're going to start from scratch today and go through the basics. We'll talk through the application process, the requirements, common reasons applications struggle, and then we'll look at what a strong application looks like versus a weak application. The hard truth. So, hot funding requirements are set forth by the Texas State Tax Code, and as the city, we mainly set requirements for how quickly you must return in paperwork, what your individual contracts say, and how those relate back to the Texas State Tax Code. So, hot funds are heavily bracketed because of where they come from and what the Texas State Tax Code would like to see them used for. So, we'll talk a little bit about what that is later, why they're heavily bracketed, and what they can be used for. But the main purpose of this is just to know that hot funds have legal requirements that we must follow, and therefore that's why we set forth those requirements for anyone who applies to use hot funds. Next is that your organization or event may not qualify, and that's okay. We want to make sure that you are as educated as possible about what hot funds are and how they can be used. But if your organization does not qualify, that's totally okay. Our department, for the communication outreach department, we're always happy to help you find an alternative funding source if that's something that you're interested in. But the purpose of hot funding is to be used for events and organizations who primarily promote tourism and encourage overnight stays for visitors in the area. So if your organization does not qualify, that does not mean that you are not an amazing organization for the city. It just may not mean this is the right funding resource for you. Lastly, receiving hot funds last year or previous years does not qualify you every year. We know many people have applied year after year, but just because you have received hot funds does not necessarily mean you qualify every year. Um, this workshop is not meant to make anyone nervous in any way, but we do want to be upfront with everyone and make sure that we're clarifying that it does not automatically qualify you every single year. You do have to reapply every year, and although the qualifications don't change, the competitiveness of the application might, and council ultimately makes the decision about who receives hot funds versus who does not. So depending on the competition or the competitive nature of that year, it could mean that some applications are not pushed through and some are. It all depends on how strong your application is and how much the focus is on tourism, whether it meets all the requirements for it, and so on and so forth. As we move forward, we'll be looking at requirements for funding. We'll be talking about proving that your organization or events promotes Gainesville as a tourism destination, or that it at least demonstrates a reasonable effort that marketing is focused on putting heads in beds or drawing people to stay the night in Gainesville hotels or short-term rentals. If this has not been on your organization's radar or at the top of your list to focus on when you are in the mindset of applying for Hot Fund, we strongly encourage that focus to shift a little bit. And at least for applying for Hot Funds, make sure that your focus is directly on promoting tourism. In this next slide, we'll be talking about the definition of hotel occupancy tax or hot funding. So, hotel occupancy tax is a tax levied by the state and local governments on guests who are staying at a lodging facility or short-term rentals. So, hotels and short-term rentals. The tax is collected by hotel operators or short-term rentals and remitted to the city or the county or both. Our local hotels have to collect that and remit that to the city, and the tax applies to hotels and short-term rentals where an individual is staying less than 30 days at a time. So, if an individual is staying for work for a consecutive 30 days or even months at a time, that does not apply to hotel occupancy tax. Another thing to note with hotel occupancy tax is something we have talked about just briefly in the last slide, is that it is heavily bracketed in the Texas State Tax Code, which is why the applicability to community events or projects is very limited. So because hot funds comes from a very specific source, which is overnight stays, This means that hot funds have a specific job to do, and we want that money to go back towards promoting overnight stays in the city of Gainesville. A good way to look at this is if we continue to pull hot funding from the account without replenishing it, there could eventually be no money left. So, this helps diversify the community as well and build your programs and organizations because you're drawing in more people than what already come to our community. But the main focus with this is that if you are using hot funds or hotel occupancy tax that has been remitted from the hotels, we want to make sure that that goes back into promoting overnight stays and continuing to replenish that account that can be used for years to come. So, when we talk about putting heads in beds, this is because we have to make sure the funding is used to promote the tourism and overnight stays and making sure that we're on track to meet those requirements by the tax code. Here we're going to talk about passing the two-part test. So this is a great, easy way for you to test your own organization or event to determine whether or not you could be eligible for hot funding. Part one of this two-part test is that expenditures must put heads in beds. So we did touch on that a minute ago, and we're going to expand on that here in the next slide. And then part two is that expenditures must fit one of the 9 categories, and we'll go through what those 9 categories are. Part one is heads in beds. So, the main focus in Heads in Beds is to market to visitors from outside the local area. Your event or organization must directly promote overnight lodging, and it's important to track visitors and report back. So, we have touched on this a few different times already, but we want to make sure that this is a high priority for anyone applying for hot funds because it is one of the most important parts of using hot funds. So, what does it mean for you? You must be working towards attracting visitors from the outside the local area. So, we want to avoid only promoting your organization or event to Gainesville residents. We want to make sure that you are marketing to a target audience that is either maybe in Oklahoma City or Waco or Wichita Falls. Those people are going to be more likely to drive into Gainesville and spend the night. One way that you can do this is if you have an event that's coming up, you can target outside of our local community through meta ads. You can target directly through their system. You can also target through billboards and make sure that those billboards are placed outside of the um, general Gainesville area. You should also consider maybe collaborating with another organization, such as those who are having an event on a similar weekend. You could maybe combine your events and create a weekend long experience for guests and encourage people to stay through the weekend instead of just for a few hours. Along with marketing outside of the area and putting heads in beds, we want to make sure that you're able to track that. So a good way to do that is through registration, asking for zip codes. You could do something like Placer AI, which is a program that tracks visitors and where they came from, how long they've stayed at a location, and so on and so forth. You could also work with local hotels or short-term rentals if you have a great connection with them and they'd like to partner with you to have a discount code. And that way it promotes not only for people to stay overnight, but it directly supports those short-term rentals and hotels in our area. Part two is 9 categories. So the Texas tax code does have 9 categories that you must meet in order to qualify. You only have to meet one, but if you fit into more than one, that's a bonus for you. Obviously, we would love to see organizations or events that fit into more than one category because you're promoting tourism in more than one way. Um, One thing to note here, if your organization doesn't fit neatly, you may not fit at all. And this goes back to qualifying as a whole for hot funds, and that's totally okay if that's not a fit for you. Again, we're more than happy to help you find alternative funding sources if that's what you need. Okay, so when reviewing each category, you want to make sure that you are you have advertising as a top priority as well. So another regulation that we have with the hotel occupancy tax is cities are only allowed to award 15% of our funding to historical preservation and 15% to arts. So in this case, advertising will be your best friend. We don't have any regulations or requirements that restrict how much we can award in terms of advertising. And not only does this assist you in strengthening your application, especially if you're historical preservation or arts, but it promotes your event overall or your organization overall. And it helps you in the long run if you're focused on advertising. So if that's something that you're not sure about, if you're historical preservation or if you're arts, or if you really just want to make sure that your organization has funding for advertising as a tourism organization, we can definitely talk a little bit more about that as well. At the end of this presentation, there will be an opportunity to sign up for individual meetings. So I'm happy to meet with anybody who feels that they would be eligible or would like to talk through their application. So there will be an opportunity here at the end to scan a QR code and sign up for that as well. Common reasons applications struggle. So there's many reasons that an application can struggle, but I definitely wanted to give some clear examples of what that could look like so it isn't a big question mark for people. So one of the ways an application can struggle is when tourism is implied but not explicitly included as a focus for events or an organization as a whole. If your organization doesn't have a focus on tourism in the application process, it wouldn't be likely that your focus would be on tourism when you're marketing or when you're executing when the funds are being used. So, since this is a main purpose for hot funding, it has to be a main focus when you apply. This means having a marketing plan to market outside of Cook County, having a plan for how that money will be used to specifically promote tourism, and having a good idea of what your target market will be. Next would be that events benefits locals more than tourists. So, as we've kind of spoken about up to this point, if your event or organization benefits the local community more than tourists or is marketed towards locals rather than tourists, that could be an application or a reason that your application struggles. As much as we love our organizations who directly support our community, unfortunately, for them and for the organizations that are more community focused, hot funding, again, is primarily focused on tourism. So this might not be the appropriate route, but for those who are focused on tourism and you know that you're focused on tourism, you want to make sure that the language and what's included in your application reflects that. Next is no evidence or plan for overnight stays. So, this has been one of the main topics of conversation again so far. It's very important to talk about again and how that could be a struggle for your application. One of the sections of the application does specifically ask how you plan to measure overnight stays as well as how many people you anticipate staying overnight. So we want to make sure that you have that thought process in mind when you're applying for hot funds is how you plan to measure that, how many people you anticipate staying, because that proves that you have tourism as a thought or as a focus when you're applying. Next is that marketing is limited to local audiences. We are not saying we don't want your event to support the local community, but we also have to make sure that you're advertising outside of Gainesville. So your target audiences should be aimed at least a 50-mile radius from Gainesville. So for example, through our Visit Gainesville, Texas pages, our marketing reach goes beyond just our city. We have it targeting Oklahoma City, we have it targeting Waco, and DFW as well. And your goal should be to increase awareness and traffic for people who don't live here. We want people to see, and we want your organization to be out there and for you to raise awareness about the things that are going on in Gainesville to people who may not already know. And last but not least, funding requested does not have specific roles. So when you're applying for hot funds, you should be aiming to include a budget outlining how the funds you are requesting are going to be used. This helps council know that you have a plan for how all of that money will be used. And It's great documentation to ensure that the funds being used are being used appropriately. Now we'll talk about submitting the best application. So lead with tourism as your goal. This is a great question to always ask yourself is, how does my event or my organization bring visitors in from outside the area to stay overnight? So we've talked about this throughout the entire presentation. You should be marketing outside your city, outside of Gainesville, to audiences who would need to spend the night if they drove in for the event. So this should be your main goal when submitting your application. It should be your focus because with hot funds, tourism is the ultimate goal. So if you're leading with tourism as your goal, it'll help everything else fall into place when you're planning for events and counting on hot funds to be the reason that you can put on these events. Next is that documentation is key. So in the application, there will be questions, like I said before, of how you plan to measure different things. So having a plan in place before you submit your application is a great way to prove that you are ready and able to follow up. Documentation can be anything from registration, sending out surveys, or working with local hotels to find out who stayed the night. But it is important to keep track of that so that we know you're focused on not only understanding how your event went, but also improving it year after year. Next is spend your funding how you say you're going to. So along with documentation, we want to make sure that what you have in your application and how you say you're going to spend your money is how you actually spend your money. So, having a plan from the start helps this tremendously because you know how you're going to spend your money from the start, and there's no question that you are sticking to that. In the event that hot funds is awarded to you or your organization and funds are spent outside of how they were originally intended to be spent, that could be a negative mark in the years to come when applying for hot funds again. So you want to make sure that you are spending it exactly how you say you're going to spend it. Next would be to align your event with eligible categories. So the 9 categories that we talked about, aligning your event with that or your organization with a category or even multiple categories will put you in the best spot for a strong application. And lastly would be to think about the year as a whole. This is a really important one that I would encourage everyone to think about when you're applying for hot funding. You definitely do not want to be awarded hot funds without a plan for what the rest of the year looks like. If at any point your organization or event does not meet requirements, it could put your organization or your event in jeopardy for not receiving those reimbursements. So reporting requirements matter as well. Planning for how that information will be collected and recorded is important to know ahead of time. And that way you make sure when it's done in a timely manner and it's organized and it's readily available to give to the city. This is because when you do receive hot funds, depending on the contract that you receive, you could be required to submit quarterly reports, but you will at least be required to submit a report after your event is over. So you want to make sure that you're prepared for how you'll collect everything and make sure that you're able to collect it in an organized way. So we are at the end of the general presentation. I will switch to a couple of different slides and give you the opportunity to either take the quiz, which is not required. It's an opportunity for anybody who would like to go through the quiz and see what actual examples look like and see if you have a good grasp on it. It's not graded in any way. We're not going to look at it. It's really just a resource for you to see if you have a good understanding of what hot funds are. So here is the quiz QR code. Please feel free to pause the video at any time, and then this will be available still on YouTube if you need to come back to it as well. But in closing, hot funds applications are officially open for fiscal year 2027. The due date is April 20th. We do have meetings available for applicants. This will be with the Communication Outreach Department, myself. I'm the Tourism Marketing Coordinator for the city, and then our Communication and Outreach Director, Paulina Schutz-Witkowski, will also be in attendance in a lot of those meetings as well. Over to the right here, you'll see the meeting sign-up QR code. So if you'd like to scan that, it'll take you to a drop form where you can fill out your name and your organization, as well as selecting one of the available dates. If you do not see a date that works for you, please use um, the space down below to submit an alternative date, and I will reach out directly to confirm if that works. If not, I'm happy to be flexible with you and find something that does work for both of us. Lastly, I am always available to help you find resources for alternative funding. So if you have gone through this presentation and decided that hot funds might not be the best route for funding for you or your organization, I'm um, always happy to find an alternative for you if that's what you need. So this will be the conclusion of our presentation. If you have any questions or would like to reach out directly, you can email me at jmaresh@cogtx.org. My information is also on the city website, and I'm always happy to answer any questions or meet with anybody about hot funding or tourism related things. But I'm so glad you were able to make it today, and I can't wait for all of the amazing organizations and events that happen in fiscal year 2027 that are supported by hot funds. Thanks so much and have a great day.